They said I was too stupid to succeed. But now I sign their paychecks. The email notification pinged on my phone at 9:47 a.m. on a Tuesday that would change everything. Congratulations, TechFlow Solutions has been awarded a 3-year IT and administrative services contract for Millbrook High School District. Contract value, $2.8 million. I stared at the screen, my dyslexic brain taking an extra beat to process the words that would normally trip me up. But these words? These were crystal clear. Millbrook High School. My old high school. My hands trembled slightly as I forwarded the email to my team. After 18 months of proposals, presentations, and negotiations, we'd won the biggest contract in TechFlow's 7-year history. The same school that had written me off as college material would now be paying my company nearly $3 million to handle their technology infrastructure and administrative support. The irony wasn't lost on me. I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, a far cry from those uncomfortable plastic seats in room 237 where Mr. Peterson, my guidance counselor, had delivered his career-killing advice. "Sarah, let's be realistic about your capabilities," he'd said during my junior year, shuffling through my transcripts like they were contaminated. "Your grades suggest you'd be much better suited for vocational training. Maybe administrative assistant work or data entry. College would just set you up for failure." I was 17 then, struggling to read basic instructions while watching my classmates breeze through AP courses I wasn't even allowed to attempt. Nobody had heard of dyslexia in our small town, or if they had, they certainly didn't bother screening for it. I was just the slow kid who took forever to read assignments and mixed up numbers on math tests. Mrs. Chen, my English teacher, had been even more direct. "Some people are academic, Sarah, and some people are practical. There's no shame in knowing your limitations." Limitations. That word had echoed in my head for years. Now, at 28, I employed 43 people across 2 offices. TechFlow Solutions specialized in streamlining technological systems for educational institutions, a niche I'd stumbled into after spending 3 years learning network administration at the community college Mr. Peterson had grudgingly helped me apply to. My phone buzzed with a text from my business partner Jake. "Holy shit, Sarah. We did it. Drinks tonight?" I smiled, remembering how we'd met in that cramped computer lab in 2018, 2 misfits who'd been told we weren't smart enough for traditional paths. Jake had failed out of his engineering program. I'd been rejected from 4 different 4-year colleges despite decent SAT scores. But we both understood systems, and more importantly, we understood what it felt like to be underestimated. The implementation timeline meant I'd be spending considerable time at Millbrook High over the next 6 months, working directly with their staff to transition their outdated systems. I'd likely see Mr. Peterson, who according to LinkedIn was still working as a guidance counselor. Mrs. Chen had retired last year, but several other faces from my past remained on the faculty roster I'd reviewed during the proposal process. Part of me wanted to strut through those hallways like I owned the place, because technically, for the next 3 years, I kind of did. But another part of me, the part that still occasionally heard that 17-year-old girl being told she wasn't smart enough, wondered if I was ready to face the people who'd nearly convinced me they were right. My assistant knocked on my office door. "Sarah? The implementation team wants to schedule the Millbrook kickoff meeting." I took a deep breath. "Tell them we start Monday." Monday morning arrived with a kind of crisp October air that made everything feel possible. I barely slept, alternating between excitement and a familiar knot of anxiety that reminded me too much of walking into Millbrook as a confused teenager. This time, though, I wore a tailored navy blazer and carried a leather briefcase that cost more than my family's monthly grocery budget used to be. The school looked smaller than I remembered, but then again, everything does when you're no longer trying to disappear into the lockers. I walked through the main entrance at exactly 8:15 a.m., flanked by Jake and our lead systems analyst, Marcus. Our heels clicked against the same linoleum floors where I'd once hurried between classes, always running late because reading the schedule took me twice as long as everyone else. "Miss Chen?" The receptionist looked up from her desk, not Mrs. Chen, my former English teacher, but a young woman who couldn't have been older than 25. "I'm Rebecca Chen, the new office coordinator." "You must be from TechFlow?" "Chen." The name hit me like a physical blow. "Are you related to Mrs. Chen? The English teacher?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "She's my mom," Rebecca smiled proudly. "She just retired last year after 32 years here. She always said this place needed a serious technology upgrade." I guess she was right. I forced a smile back. I guess she was. Principal Williams emerged from his office. He'd been the assistant principal when I was a student, but apparently had moved up in the world. Unlike the faculty who'd written me off, he'd always been kind, if distant. He approached with genuine warmth, extending his hand. "Sarah Martinez. I have to say, when I saw your name on the contract proposal, I wondered if it could be the same Sarah Martinez who graduated in 2014. This is incredible. We're so proud to have you back." The words felt surreal. Proud. No one at this school had ever expressed pride in anything I'd done. "Thank you, Principal Williams. We're excited to modernize your systems." I gestured to my team. "This is Jake Morrison, my business partner, and Marcus Rodriguez, our lead analyst." As we shook hands and exchanged pleasantries, I caught sight of a familiar figure down the hallway. Mr. Peterson, looking exactly the same except for grayer hair and deeper lines around his eyes. He was walking toward us with a manila folder clutched in his hands, probably containing some student's future he was about to crush. "The guidance office is actually one of our priority areas," Principal Williams was saying. "Our student information system crashes at least twice a week, and college application processing has been a nightmare. Mr. Peterson has been practically begging for an upgrade." Mr. Peterson approached our group, and I watched recognition dawn on his face. His step faltered slightly, and for just a moment, I saw something that looked almost like embarrassment flicker across his features. "Tom," Principal Williams called out, "come meet our new technology partners. This is Sarah Martinez from TechFlow Solutions." Sarah actually graduated from here in 2014. Mr. Peterson extended his hand, his smile tight and professional. "Ms. Martinez. Congratulations on landing such a significant contract." His voice was exactly the same, that measured, slightly condescending tone that had once convinced me I wasn't college material. But now he was speaking to someone who was about to restructure his entire digital workflow, someone whose approval he needed for system access and training schedules. Mr. Peterson, I replied, shaking his hand firmly. I believe we'll be working very closely together over the next few months. The irony of those words hung in the air between us, heavy with possibility. The tour of Millbrook's IT infrastructure was even worse than I'd anticipated. Their server room looked like a technology graveyard, ancient Dell towers from 2009 humming like dying refrigerators, cables snaking everywhere without any organizational system, and a backup solution that hadn't been updated since Obama's first term. We know it's not ideal, Mr. Peterson said, hovering behind me as I documented the disaster with my tablet. The budget has been challenging. I bit back my first response, which was to point out that maybe if they'd invested in actual IT support instead of dismissing students who showed technical aptitude, they wouldn't be in this mess. Instead, I nodded professionally and made notes. How long has the system been running like this? Marcus asked, photographing a server that was literally held together with duct tape. About 4 years, Principal Williams admitted. We lost our IT coordinator in the 2019 budget cuts and just never replaced him. Jake whistled low. You've been running student records, grades, and financial data on this setup for 4 years without dedicated IT support? The silence that followed was telling. I could see the embarrassment on their faces, the same kind of shame I'd felt when teachers would call on me to read aloud and I'd stumble through sentences that seemed to rearrange themselves on the page. Well, I said, closing my tablet, that's exactly why we're here. We'll have you completely modernized within 6 months. As we moved through the building, I noticed things I'd missed as a student, or maybe things that hadn't mattered when I was just trying to survive each day. The guidance office where Mr. Peterson had crushed my college dreams was cramped and outdated, with filing cabinets that looked like they belonged in a 1980s detective show. His computer was so old it still had a tower unit, and I watched him struggle to open what looked like a basic spreadsheet. The college recommendation system has been particularly problematic, he was explaining to Jake. Sometimes it takes 15 minutes just to load a student's transcript, and the software crashes if I try to access more than one file at a time. I found myself studying Mr. Peterson as he talked. He looked tired. Frustrated. Like someone who'd been fighting a losing battle against obsolete technology for years. It was almost enough to make me feel sorry for him. Ms. Martinez? A voice behind me made me turn. Rebecca Chen was approaching with an older woman who made my stomach clench with recognition. Mrs. Chen. My former English teacher. She looked smaller than I remembered, wearing a simple cardigan instead of the stern blazers she'd favored during my school years. Her hair was completely gray now, and she moved with the careful pace of someone nursing a bad hip. Mom wanted to come in and meet you, Rebecca said brightly. When I told her about the contract, she was so excited to hear you'd done so well for yourself. Excited. The woman who told me I should accept my limitations was excited about my success. Mrs. Chen extended a weathered hand. Sarah, dear, I hope you don't mind me dropping by. Rebecca told me about your company, and I just had to congratulate you personally. Mrs. Chen, I managed, shaking her hand. Thank you. You know, she continued, her voice warm in a way I'd never heard directed at me before, I always wondered what happened to you after graduation. You were such a determined student, even when the work was challenging. I'm not surprised you found your path. Determined. Challenging work. Was she talking about the same student she'd steered away from AP English? The same girl she'd told wasn't academic material? I felt Jake's questioning glance. He knew my history here, knew exactly who these people were. But Mrs. Chen was looking at me with genuine pride, as if she'd played some positive role in my development instead of merely derailing it entirely. I should let you get back to work, she said, patting my arm gently. But I do hope we'll have a chance to chat more. I'd love to hear about your journey. As she walked away, I stood there processing the cognitive dissonance. Had she genuinely forgotten how she treated me? Or was this revisionist history, a comfortable fiction where she'd always believed in my potential? Mr. Peterson was watching our interaction with an unreadable expression. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of technical assessments and polite conversations, but Mrs. Chen's words kept echoing in my head. Determined student. Always wondered what happened to you. The casual rewriting of history felt almost worse than the original dismissal. By 11:30 a.m., we'd completed the infrastructure audit and moved into the administrative offices. I was reviewing network access protocols when Mr. Peterson approached my temporary workstation, a folding table set up in the main hallway because their conference room's projector hadn't worked since 2018. Ms. Martinez, do you have a moment? His voice carried that same formal tone, but there was something else underneath it now. Uncertainty, maybe. I looked up from my laptop. Of course. He glanced around, then lowered his voice. I wanted to discuss the guidance office integration privately. The student information system contains sensitive data, college applications, personal statements, family financial information. I need to ensure the transition won't compromise student privacy. It was a legitimate concern, but the way he said it felt like a test. Like he was still trying to figure out if I was competent enough to handle real responsibility. Our security protocols exceed state requirements, I said evenly. All data transfers are encrypted, and we maintain separate access levels for different staff members. I can show you the technical specifications if you'd like. That would be helpful, yes. He paused, then added, I have to admit, I'm not very technically inclined. This upgrade feels overwhelming. For a split second, I saw past the authority figure who'd once crushed my dreams and glimpsed someone who was genuinely struggling. The same way I'd struggled with reading assignments that seemed impossible to decode. Then I remembered sitting in his office as a 17-year-old, listening to him explain why community college was more realistic for someone with my academic profile, and the sympathy evaporated. We'll provide comprehensive training, I said. You'll be fine. At 12:15 p.m., Jake and I took a break in the parking lot, ostensibly to call our office but really so I could process everything without maintaining a professional facade. Your old English teacher seems nice, Jake said, leaning against our rental car. She told me I wasn't college material, I replied flatly. Junior year. Said some people are academic and some people are practical, and I should accept my limitations. Jake's eyebrows shot up. The same woman who just said she always believed in your determination? The exact same woman. Jesus, Sarah. How are you holding it together? I stared at the school building, watching students stream out for lunch. They looked so young, so uncertain. Some of them probably struggling the same way I had, being written off by adults who were supposed to help them succeed. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to confront her, make her remember what she actually said. But what's the point? She's retired. She seems happy believing she was always supportive. And Peterson? Peterson remembers exactly what he said. I can tell. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, found something weird in the guidance office database. You need to see this. We headed back inside, where Marcus was hunched over his laptop in Mr. Peterson's office. The guidance counselor stood nearby, looking uncomfortable. What did you find? I asked. Marcus turned his screen toward me. I was documenting their current software for the migration, and I pulled up some historical data to understand their file structure. Look at this. The screen showed a database entry from 2014, my senior year. My name was at the top, and below it, a series of codes and notes that made my blood run cold. College potential, moderate to high. Standardized test scores suggest undiagnosed learning disability. Recommend educational assessment and modified instruction approaches. I stared at the entry, reading it 3 times before the words fully sank in. Mr. Peterson had known. He'd suspected I had a learning disability, had noted my potential, and had steered me away from college anyway. Mr. Peterson, I said quietly, not taking my eyes off the screen. Would you like to explain this? The silence in the guidance office stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Mr. Peterson's face had gone pale, his eyes darting between the computer screen and the exit like a trapped animal looking for escape routes. That's an old entry, he stammered, reaching toward the laptop as if he could somehow make the damning evidence disappear. The coding system was different then. Marcus, I said, my voice deadly calm, what do these codes actually mean? Marcus pulled up another window, showing the database legend. LP7 means learning profile, above average intelligence with processing challenges. The recommendation code EALD stands for educational assessment, learning disability suspected. And this note here. He pointed to a timestamp. This was entered on March 15, 2014. March 15, 2014. 2 weeks before Mr. Peterson had called me into his office to crush my college dreams. 2 weeks before he told me to be realistic about my capabilities. Jake let out a low whistle. So you knew she was smart. You knew she probably had a learning disability. And you still steered her away from college? Mr. Peterson's professional mask was crumbling. You don't understand the pressures we were under. Budget cuts, state testing requirements, college acceptance rates affecting our funding. Students with learning disabilities. He caught himself, but it was too late. Students with learning disabilities what? I asked, standing up slowly. Hurt your statistics? That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? My voice was rising despite my efforts to stay professional. Because this entry suggests you thought I was intelligent enough for college but chose not to pursue proper support services. Why? The truth hung in the air like smoke. I could see it in his eyes, in the way his shoulders sagged with defeat. The assessment would have cost the district money, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Speech therapy, extended testing time, modified curricula. And even with accommodations, learning disabled students had lower graduation rates from 4-year institutions. It affected our guidance success metrics. Success metrics, I repeated. You destroyed my confidence and nearly derailed my entire future because of success metrics? I thought community college was a better fit. You thought I was a liability. The words exploded out of me. You had evidence that I was capable, that I just needed proper support, and you buried it to protect your precious statistics. Jake stepped closer, probably worried I was about to do something that would jeopardize our contract. But Marcus was still typing, his face grim with concentration. Sarah, Marcus said urgently, there are more entries like this. A lot more. He pulled up a search window showing dozens of student records from 2010 to 2018, all with similar codes. LP6 and LP7 intelligence ratings coupled with suspected learning disabilities, and recommendation after recommendation for vocational training instead of educational assessment. Jesus Christ, Jake breathed. How many kids did you do this to? Mr. Peterson sank into his desk chair like a deflated balloon. You have to understand, the state was threatening to cut funding if our college placement rates didn't improve. Students who struggled were viewed as risks. So you decided who was worth investing in based on spreadsheets, I said, scrolling through record after record of bright kids who'd been written off. Did any of these students ever get properly assessed? Some got help in college. Community colleges had better support services for the damaged goods you dumped on them? I found myself thinking about all the late nights I'd spent in that community college computer lab, convinced I was too stupid for real academic work, fighting against every piece of evidence that I wasn't college material. How many years had I wasted believing I was fundamentally broken? I want copies of all these records, I said to Marcus. Every single student who was coded as having potential but steered away from appropriate services. Sarah, Mr. Peterson said desperately, this was years ago. I was following district policy. The system has changed. Has it? I turned to face him fully. Because according to your current data, you're still underperforming on learning disability identification and support services. Some things never change, do they, Mr. Peterson? My phone buzzed. A text from our office, Channel 7 wants interview about local company landing major school contract. Good publicity opportunity? I stared at the message, then at the database full of buried potential, then at Mr. Peterson's terrified face. You know what, I said slowly, I think that interview sounds like an excellent idea. The interview was scheduled for 4 p.m. that same day in the school's main lobby. I spent the lunch hour in my car, calling our PR team and carefully crafting talking points that would sound like a heartwarming local success story while subtly highlighting the systemic failures I'd uncovered. Keep it positive but pointed, Jake advised over speakerphone from our office. Focus on the importance of believing in every student's potential. By 3:45 p.m., Channel 7's news crew had transformed Millbrook's entrance into a small studio. Principal Williams hovered nearby, clearly thrilled about the positive publicity. What he didn't know was that I'd spent my lunch break making copies of those database records and consulting with our company lawyer about whistleblower protections. We're rolling in 30 seconds, the producer announced. This is just a feel-good piece about local entrepreneur makes good, so keep it light. I smoothed my blazer and caught sight of Mr. Peterson lurking near the guidance office. He'd been avoiding me since our confrontation, but I could feel his eyes on me now, probably wondering exactly what I planned to say. Good afternoon, I'm Jessica Wong with Channel 7 News. I'm here with Sarah Martinez, CEO of TechFlow Solutions, whose company just landed a $2.8 million contract with her old high school. Sarah, tell us about this incredible homecoming. The camera's red light blinked on, and I felt that familiar surge of adrenaline I got when closing major deals. Thanks, Jessica. It's surreal being back at Millbrook, especially in a position to help modernize the technology that supports student success. When I was a student here, I struggled academically in ways that weren't properly understood or addressed. Jessica's eyebrows raised slightly. This wasn't the fluff piece she'd expected. What kind of struggles? I had dyslexia, which went undiagnosed throughout high school. Instead of receiving appropriate support services, I was steered away from college preparatory courses and told I should aim lower in my career aspirations. I saw Principal Williams' face go pale in my peripheral vision. This definitely wasn't the publicity angle he'd approved. That must have been incredibly discouraging, Jessica said, leaning forward with genuine interest. It was devastating. But what I've discovered today is even more troubling. I held up a printed spreadsheet, carefully anonymized to protect student privacy. While reviewing the school's database for our system integration, we found evidence that guidance counselors had documented suspected learning disabilities in numerous students but failed to pursue proper assessments or support services. Are you saying the school knew these students needed help but didn't provide it? I'm saying there appears to have been a systematic pattern of identifying struggling students with high potential and steering them toward lower academic tracks rather than investing in the support services they needed to succeed. Jessica turned toward the camera. We reached out to the school district for comment, but have not yet received a response. Sarah, what would you say to other students who might be facing similar challenges? I'd tell them that struggling to learn doesn't mean you're not intelligent. It often means you learn differently, and with the right support, you can achieve anything. No guidance counselor or teacher should have the power to decide your potential based on outdated metrics or budget constraints. And what's your message to the educators watching? I looked directly into the camera, knowing Mr. Peterson was probably watching from somewhere in the building. Every student deserves an advocate, not a gatekeeper. When you write off a child's potential, you're not just affecting their high school transcript, you're shaping how they see themselves for years to come. The interview wrapped at 4:17 p.m., and Jessica immediately cornered me for additional background information. This is a much bigger story than we thought. Would you be willing to go on record with specific details about these database findings? Before I could answer, Principal Williams appeared at my elbow, his face flushed and his voice strained. Ms. Martinez, I think there may have been some misunderstanding about those student records. Perhaps we should discuss this privately before. Before what? I asked. Before other parents realized their children might have been failed by the same system that failed me? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, saw the interview preview online. I was class of 2015 and went through the same thing. Can we talk? Kevin Chen. Chen. Another one. As I read the message, I realized this was just the beginning. Within an hour of the interview airing, my phone was ringing nonstop. Kevin Chen was just the first. Sarah, it's Marcus, my analyst's voice was tight with urgency. You need to get back here. We've got a situation. I was still in the school parking lot, fielding calls from former students who'd seen the news preview online. 3 more people had reached out with eerily similar stories, high test scores, documented learning difficulties, and guidance counselors who'd steered them away from 4-year colleges. What kind of situation? I asked, watching Principal Williams pace frantically in his office window. The school district's legal team just showed up. They're demanding we cease all data analysis and turn over any copies of student records. They're claiming we've violated confidentiality agreements. My stomach dropped. We're allowed access to historical data for system integration. That was explicitly stated in the contract. I know, but they're saying we've exceeded the scope of our agreement. And Sarah. Mr. Peterson is here with them. He's claiming you threatened him this morning. I what? The accusation hit like a physical blow. I never threatened anyone. He says you coerced him into showing you confidential files and then used them to publicly attack the school's reputation. District Council is talking about breach of contract and potential legal action. I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar anxiety that always came when my past and present collided. This was exactly what Mr. Peterson was counting on, that I'd fold under pressure the same way I had as a 17-year-old. I'm coming back, I said. Don't give them anything until I get there. The drive back to TechFlow's offices took 12 minutes that felt like hours. I called Jake on the way, my hands shaking as I navigated traffic. They're trying to discredit me, I told him. Same playbook as high school, make a problem student look unstable and unreliable. Except you're not a student anymore, Jake reminded me firmly. You're the CEO of a company with a $2.8 million contract and a squeaky clean legal record. Let them try to paint you as the villain. But as I pulled into our parking garage, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was 17 again, sitting in Mr. Peterson's office while he explained why my dreams were unrealistic. The scene in our conference room was tense enough to cut with a knife. 3 people in expensive suits sat across from Marcus and our company lawyer, Jennifer Walsh. Mr. Peterson sat slightly apart from the legal team, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Ms. Martinez, the lead attorney, stood as I entered. I'm David Brennan, counsel for Millbrook School District. We need to discuss your unauthorized use of confidential student information. Everything we accessed was within the parameters of our signed contract, I replied, taking my seat next to Jennifer. We're conducting a comprehensive system audit, which requires reviewing historical data structures. Reviewing, yes. Copying and publicizing, no. Brennan slid a document across the table. Mr. Peterson has provided a detailed account of this morning's events, including your harassment of school personnel and threats regarding media exposure. I scanned Mr. Peterson's statement, my disbelief growing with each line. According to his version, I'd aggressively confronted him, demanded access to sealed records, and explicitly threatened negative publicity if he didn't comply with my requests. It was masterfully crafted fiction. This is completely false, I said, looking directly at Mr. Peterson. Every interaction was witnessed by my team members and occurred during normal business operations. Mr. Peterson finally met my eyes, and I saw something that surprised me, not malice, but desperation. He looked like someone drowning, willing to pull anyone down to save himself. Ms. Martinez became increasingly hostile when I explained our privacy protocols, he said quietly. She seemed to take the limitations personally. I took it personally, I said slowly, because you destroyed my educational future 16 years ago, and I discovered today that you did it knowingly and deliberately. The room fell silent. Brennan's carefully prepared legal strategy clearly hadn't accounted for the personal history underlying this conflict. That's exactly the kind of vindictive behavior we're concerned about, Brennan said, recovering quickly. This appears to be a personal vendetta disguised as professional whistleblowing. My phone buzzed with another text from Kevin Chen, found 2 more people from our class. We're not letting this go. The legal standoff stretched into its second hour when Jennifer's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and frowned. I need to take this, she said, stepping into the hallway. Through the glass wall, I watched her face grow increasingly serious as she spoke. When she returned, her expression was unreadable. That was the State Department of Education, she announced to the room. They've received multiple complaints regarding potential violations of federal disability rights laws at Millbrook High School. They're opening a formal investigation. Brennan's confident demeanor cracked slightly. What complaints? Apparently, Ms. Martinez's interview inspired several former students to file grievances. The DOE is particularly interested in allegations that the district systematically avoided providing federally mandated learning disability assessments to reduce special education costs. I felt a surge of vindication, but Mr. Peterson looked like he might be sick. His hands trembled as he reached for his water glass. This is spiraling out of control, he whispered to Brennan. I told you we should have handled this quietly. Handled what quietly? I asked. The cover-up? The fact that you've been failing students for years to meet budget targets? My phone buzzed again. Kevin Chen, Channel 7 wants to interview us at 6 p.m. 5 families ready to go on record. I showed the message to Jennifer, who nodded grimly. Mr. Brennan, I'd suggest your clients reconsider their position. This is no longer about a single contract dispute. Brennan was typing furiously on his phone, probably updating his superiors on the escalating situation. Ms. Martinez, surely we can reach some accommodation. Perhaps a revised contract scope that addresses everyone's concerns? You mean a scope that covers up what we've already discovered? I laughed bitterly. That's exactly what Mr. Peterson tried to do with my record 16 years ago, bury the evidence and hope no one noticed. Sarah, Mr. Peterson said suddenly, his voice cracking. Can we speak privately for a moment? Brennan shot him a sharp look. Tom, I'd advise against. Please, Mr. Peterson interrupted. Just 5 minutes. Against Jennifer's obvious reservations, I followed him to an empty office down the hall. Up close, he looked haggard, older than his 62 years. I know you hate me, he began, and you have every right to. But this investigation, it's going to destroy careers of people who had nothing to do with the guidance policies. People like you? I asked. People like Rebecca Chen. The new teachers who are actually trying to do right by their students. The district will throw everyone under the bus to minimize legal liability. I studied his face, searching for manipulation but finding only exhaustion. You should have thought about that before you decided to lie about me threatening you. I panicked, he admitted. When Brennan asked how you got access to those records, I made it sound like you coerced me because I was afraid they'd blame me for not protecting them properly. So you threw me under the bus instead. Again. He flinched at the word again. I know I failed you. I failed a lot of students. The system was broken, but that doesn't excuse what I did. My phone rang, Jake calling from our main office. Sarah, you need to see the news. Channel 7 just ran a follow-up story. They found documentation that the state warned Millbrook about low learning disability identification rates 3 years ago. This is huge. Through the office window, I could see Brennan pacing in the conference room, his phone pressed to his ear. Whatever he was hearing wasn't good news for the district. Mr. Peterson, I said, ending my call, if you want to minimize the damage to innocent people, there's only one way to do it. What do you mean? Tell the truth. All of it. On camera. Tonight. His face went white. They'll fire me. I'll lose my pension. Maybe, I agreed. But staying quiet means the investigation drags on for months, destroying more careers and traumatizing more families. At least this way, you control your own story. We stared at each other across the small office, the guidance counselor who'd once held my future in his hands, and the CEO who now held his. The decision hung between us like a blade. Mr. Peterson's face cycled through emotions, fear, resignation, something that might have been relief. Before he could respond, Jennifer appeared in the doorway. Sarah, we have a problem. Channel 7 just called, they want to air a special investigation tonight at 11 p.m. They've connected with 12 former students spanning 8 graduation years, all with similar stories. My phone immediately buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Amanda Foster, class of 2012. Saw your interview. They did the same thing to me. I have documentation. Then another, Mike Rodriguez, 2016. Still have my guidance meeting notes. Mr. Peterson told my parents I wasn't university material, despite my 1340 SAT score. Jesus, I breathed, scrolling through message after message. How many kids were there? Mr. Peterson slumped against the wall. The state required us to maintain a 78% college enrollment rate to qualify for academic excellence funding. Students with suspected learning disabilities were statistical risks. Statistical risks, I repeated. You're talking about children. Jennifer's phone rang again. She answered, listened for 30 seconds, then her face went grim. That was the district superintendent's office. They're calling an emergency school board meeting for tomorrow morning. Mr. Peterson, you're being placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The blood drained from his face. They're making me the fall guy. You made yourself the fall guy when you lied about me threatening you, I shot back. But it doesn't have to end there. Back in the conference room, Brennan was packing his briefcase with sharp, angry movements. The other attorneys looked like they'd rather be defending tobacco companies. Ms. Martinez, Brennan said without looking up, the district is prepared to honor your existing contract with some modifications to data access protocols. We trust this resolves any concerns about our business relationship. What about the investigation? I asked. The district will cooperate fully with state authorities while maintaining appropriate confidentiality protections for current and former students. It was corporate speak for, we'll stonewall until this blows over. That's not going to work, I said. Not when Channel 7 is sitting on interviews with 12 victims and documentation going back 8 years. Brennan's briefcase snapped shut with finality. The district's position is that any negative publicity resulting from your media statements constitutes a breach of our professional relationship. We'll be reviewing all available legal remedies. After they left, our conference room felt like a crime scene. Marcus was quietly backing up files to secure servers, Jake was fielding calls from reporters, and Jennifer was researching legal precedents for whistleblower protection in education contracts. What's our exposure? I asked Jennifer. Minimal, if we stick to documented facts. The contract language gives us broad access for system integration, and everything you've revealed was already in their own databases. But Sarah. She paused, choosing her words carefully. If they can prove personal vendetta was your primary motivation, they might have grounds for breach of contract claims. My phone buzzed with a call from Kevin Chen. I stepped into the hallway to answer. Sarah, this is bigger than we thought. I contacted my mom's friend who worked in the district office during those years. She says there were internal memos about optimizing college placement statistics and redirecting at-risk students to vocational tracks. She kept copies. Copies of what? District-wide policy documents. Instructions to guidance counselors on identifying students who might hurt their numbers. Sarah, your case wasn't isolated. It was official policy. I leaned against the wall, processing the implications. This wasn't just about Mr. Peterson's individual decisions. The entire district had systematically failed students like me, and now they were scrambling to contain the fallout. Kevin, are you willing to go on camera with those documents? Already called Channel 7. We're meeting them at 8 p.m. The war was just beginning. The Channel 7 newsroom at 8 p.m. looked like a war room. Kevin Chen sat across from me at a conference table covered with documents, his mother's friend Margaret Wong beside him clutching a manila folder like it contained state secrets. In many ways, it did. These are photocopies of district memos from 2010 to 2018, Margaret explained to reporter Jessica Wong, her hands shaking slightly as she opened the folder. I was an administrative assistant in the superintendent's office. When the budget crises hit, there was enormous pressure to maintain state funding tied to academic performance metrics. Jessica leaned forward, her camera operator already rolling. What kind of pressure? Margaret pulled out a document dated September 2013, my senior year. This memo went to all guidance counselors. It's titled Optimizing College Readiness Statistics for State Reporting. I read over Jessica's shoulder, my stomach clenching with each line. Asterisk counselors should prioritize college track recommendations for students with highest probability of four-year graduation success. Students presenting learning or behavioral challenges should be guided toward community college or vocational programs where support services are more readily available. This approach maximizes our college-bound percentage while ensuring students are placed in appropriate settings for their capabilities. Asterisk. Jesus, Kevin muttered. It's right there in black and white. Jessica looked up from the memo. This essentially instructed counselors to avoid recommending college for students who might struggle, even if they had the academic potential? That's exactly what it did, Margaret confirmed. And there are more. Budget memos calculating the cost savings of reducing special education assessments. Performance evaluations that rewarded counselors for maintaining high college placement percentages. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake, district lawyers just called. They're threatening injunction to stop tonight's broadcast. Says confidential personnel docs. I showed the message to Jessica, who immediately called her producer. Legal department needs to review these documents now. If they're legitimate personnel files, we might have to pull the story. They're not personnel files, Margaret said firmly. These were policy documents distributed to multiple departments. I kept copies because I knew something wasn't right. While Jessica conferred with Channel 7's lawyers, Kevin turned to me. How are you holding up with all this? Honestly? I feel like I'm 17 again, watching adults decide my future without asking what I wanted. I gestured toward the pile of documents. Except now I understand it wasn't about my capabilities at all. It was about their spreadsheets. My phone rang, Jennifer Walsh calling from our office. Sarah, we have developments. The state investigation team wants to interview you tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. And the teachers union just issued a statement supporting the investigation. They're claiming district administration pressured guidance staff to implement these policies. They're throwing Peterson and the other counselors under the bus? Looks like it. Also, Principal Williams called our office. He wants to meet with you privately before tomorrow's school board meeting. I glanced around the newsroom, where Jessica was in heated discussion with her legal team. Did he say what about? He mentioned finding a solution that protects everyone's interests. Sounded like damage control to me. Kevin was watching my conversation with obvious concern. When I hung up, he leaned closer. They're going to try to buy you off, aren't they? Probably. But it's too late for quiet settlements. There are too many victims, too much documentation. Jessica returned to our table, her expression grim. Legal cleared the documents, but we have to be careful about how we present them. We can't directly accuse individual staff members of deliberate discrimination without giving them chance to respond. Have you reached out to Mr. Peterson? I asked. Multiple times. No response. His union rep issued a statement saying he's cooperating fully with district review processes but won't comment publicly. Margaret Wong pulled out another document, this one marked confidential in red letters. This might change his mind about staying quiet. The paper was a performance evaluation from 2015, Peterson's name at the top. Under areas of excellence, someone had written, successfully redirected 23 at-risk students to alternative pathways, maintaining department's 79% college placement rate and exceeding district targets. 23 students. In a single year. At-risk students, Kevin said bitterly. That's what they called us. Jessica's eyes lit up with a kind of intensity that meant she smelled a Pulitzer. Margaret, how many counselors received similar performance evaluations? All of them. It was district policy to reward statistical optimization. My phone buzzed with another text, this time from a number I didn't recognize. This is Tom Peterson. Can we talk? I saw the news preview. There are things you need to know about the district administration's role in this. I stared at the message, remembering our conversation earlier when he'd looked broken and desperate. Maybe the union had advised him to cooperate, or maybe watching his colleagues get thrown under the bus had finally motivated him to tell the truth. Kevin, I said, showing him the text. What would you say to meeting with Peterson? Off camera, just to hear what he has to say? After what he did to us? Kevin's jaw tightened. I'd say it's about damn time he started talking. The truth was expanding like ripples on water, and tomorrow's school board meeting would determine whether those ripples became waves. The emergency school board meeting was called for 7 a.m., 30 minutes before the regular school day started. I arrived at 6:45 to find the parking lot already crowded with news vans, district vehicles, and cars I didn't recognize. Through the main entrance, I could see clusters of people in the hallway, some in suits who were obviously lawyers, others who looked like parents clutching printouts of news articles. Sarah. Kevin Chin jogged across the parking lot toward me, followed by 3 other people I didn't recognize. These are some of the other students from the Channel 7 investigation. Amanda Foster, Mike Rodriguez, and Jessica Park. Amanda stepped forward, extending her hand. Class of 2012. Peterson told my parents I should consider realistic career options despite my 3.7 GPA. Ended up at community college for 3 years before transferring to state. Mike nodded grimly. 2016, had a 1340 SAT score but was steered toward automotive technology because I struggled with reading comprehension. Turns out I have dysgraphia, didn't get diagnosed until I was 22 and paying for my own assessment. Jessica Park looked the angriest of the group. 2014, same year as you, Sarah. Peterson literally told me that students from non-English speaking households often struggled with university level work. My parents spoke perfect English, they were both engineers who immigrated from Korea. The casual racism of that comment hit me like a physical blow. He said that to your face? In front of my parents. Said community college would be a better cultural fit for our family's expectations. Jessica's voice was tight with controlled fury. I have the meeting notes my mom took. She wrote everything down because she couldn't believe what she was hearing. As we walked toward the building entrance, I spotted Mr. Peterson's car in the faculty lot. So he decided to face this head-on rather than hide behind union lawyers. Part of me respected that choice, another part wondered what kind of desperation had driven him to it. Inside, the hallway outside the boardroom was packed. I recognized Margaret Wong from last night's interview, now surrounded by 3 people in expensive suits who were obviously trying to convince her not to testify. Principal Williams stood near the guidance office, speaking in hushed tones with someone I assumed was the superintendent, a tall woman with silver hair and the kind of rigid posture that screamed damage control. Ms. Martinez? A young man with a recorder approached our group. I'm David Kim from the State Journal. Can you comment on reports that your company might lose the district contract over these allegations? Before I could answer, Jennifer Walsh appeared at my elbow. No comments until after the hearing, she said firmly, guiding me away from the reporter. Sarah, we need to talk. The district made an offer. She pulled me into an empty classroom where Jake was already waiting, his laptop open to what looked like a legal document. They're offering to expand the TechFlow contract to $4.2 million over 5 years, Jennifer explained. In exchange, you agree to limit your public statements about historical district policies and focus exclusively on future technology improvements. They want to buy my silence, I said flatly. Essentially, yes. But Sarah, there's something else. I spent the night researching the legal implications of everything that's come out. If the state investigation confirms systematic civil rights violations, the district could face federal sanctions that would make our contract worthless anyway. They're desperate. Jake turned his laptop toward me. Look at this. The school board agenda was supposed to be a closed session about personnel matters, but they've been forced to make it public due to media pressure. Peterson's termination hearing is scheduled for 8:30 a.m. They're firing him? Effective immediately. Along with 2 other guidance counselors who were there during the policy implementation period. The superintendent is claiming they acted independently against district directives. I stared at the agenda, feeling a familiar knot of anxiety. This was exactly how institutions protected themselves, sacrificed the individual employees while claiming ignorance about systemic problems. My phone buzzed with a text from Peterson. They're making me the scapegoat for 8 years of district policy. I have recordings of administrative meetings where these decisions were made. Meet me in room 237 before the hearing starts? Room 237. The same classroom where he destroyed my college dreams 16 years ago. The irony was almost too perfect to ignore. Room 237 looked exactly the same beige walls, same flickering fluorescent light, same uncomfortable plastic chairs arranged in perfect rows. But walking through that door as a 28-year-old CEO instead of a confused teenager felt like stepping through a portal between 2 different lives. Mr. Peterson sat at the teacher's desk, looking smaller than I remembered. In front of him lay a digital recorder and a manila envelope thick with documents. His hand shook slightly as he looked up at me. Thank you for coming, he said quietly. I wasn't sure you would. I remained standing near the door, keeping my distance. You said you have recordings? He nodded toward the device. 8 years worth of administrative meetings. I started recording them in 2010 after the first round of budget cuts, when the directives started getting ethically questionable. I guess some part of me knew this day would come. Why are you showing me this now? Because in 30 minutes, they're going to fire me and claim I went rogue. That I implemented discriminatory policies without authorization. His laugh was bitter. They'll make me the villain while Superintendent Crawford walks away clean. He pressed play on the recorder. A tinny voice filled the room, Crawford's voice, though younger than the woman I'd seen in the hallway. Asterisk, the reality is that special education assessments cost the district $3,200 per student. If we can redirect borderline cases to community college pathways, we save money while maintaining our college-bound statistics. It's a win-win. Asterisk. Another voice, one I didn't recognize. Asterisk, what about the students who could succeed with proper support? Asterisk. Crawford again. Asterisk, Tom, your job is to counsel students toward realistic outcomes. A learning disabled student who struggles through 4 years at state and graduates with a 2.2 GPA doesn't help anyone. Better they excel in a community college program that matches their capabilities. Asterisk. I felt sick. She's talking about human beings like their budget line items. Peterson stopped the recording. There are hours more. Specific discussions about keeping assessment referrals below 4% to maintain costs. Instructions to emphasize alternative pathways for any student who might require accommodations. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake, board meeting starting early. They moved it up to 7:15. Where are you? I have to go, I said, but Peterson stood up urgently. Sarah, wait. There's something else. He opened the manila envelope and pulled out a document that made my blood freeze. This is your original assessment request from Mrs. Patterson, your junior year English teacher. I stared at the form, dated October 2013. Mrs. Patterson had recommended me for learning disability evaluation, noting high verbal intelligence with significant reading processing delays, and student demonstrates comprehension well above grade level when material is presented orally. Mrs. Patterson submitted this? I whispered. But Mrs. Chin said. Mrs. Chin never saw it. Neither did your parents. Peterson's voice was barely audible. I was instructed to file these requests without action if the student was already on track for community college placement. The betrayal cut deeper than anything else I'd discovered. There had been a teacher who believed in me, who tried to get me help, and her efforts had been buried in some filing cabinet while I spent years believing I was fundamentally broken. How many? I asked. 47 assessment requests over 6 years. Filed and forgotten. The number hit like a physical blow. 47 students who could have gotten help, who could have understood their own minds, who instead spent years thinking they weren't smart enough. My phone rang, Jennifer calling. Sarah, you need to get in here now. The superintendent just announced they're terminating Peterson's employment effective immediately and launching criminal charges for falsifying student records. I looked at Peterson, who was carefully placing the documents back in the envelope. Are you going to fight this? I asked. With what resources? They'll drag it out in court for years while I lose my pension and my reputation. He held out the envelope. But you can. Take these recordings. Make sure people know the truth about who really failed those kids. Through the classroom window, I could see news crews setting up cameras outside the boardroom. In 10 minutes, they'd watch Peterson get crucified for policies that came from the top, while Crawford painted herself as a reformer cleaning house. Unless someone changed the narrative. I took the envelope, feeling its weight. Mr. Peterson, how do you feel about press conferences? The press conference wasn't planned, it just happened. One moment I was standing in the hallway outside room 237 with Peterson's envelope of evidence. The next I was surrounded by reporters who'd been lurking near the boardroom, waiting for developments. Ms. Martinez. David Kim from the State Journal pushed forward. Can you confirm reports that guidance counselor Peterson is being terminated this morning? Behind him, Jessica Wong from Channel 7 had her camera rolling. Are these firings connected to your whistleblower allegations? I looked through the crowd toward the boardroom, where I could see Superintendent Crawford through the glass doors, gesturing emphatically to the school board members. She was probably explaining how Peterson had gone rogue, how the district was shocked to discover these violations, how they were taking swift action to correct past mistakes. The same story institutions always told when the truth came out. Mr. Peterson is being made a scapegoat, I said, loud enough for all the reporters to hear. The district is attempting to pin 8 years of systematic discrimination on individual guidance counselors who were following direct orders from administration. What evidence do you have of that? Kim asked, his recorder thrust toward my face. I held up the manila envelope. 8 years of recorded administrative meetings where these policies were discussed and implemented at the district level. Audio documentation proving that guidance counselors were explicitly instructed to avoid special education referrals to save money. The hallway went dead silent. Even the reporters seemed stunned by the scope of what I was alleging. You have recordings of district administrators? Jessica Wong's eyes widened. Are you willing to share those publicly? Before I could answer, the boardroom doors burst open and Superintendent Crawford strode out, flanked by 2 men in suits who were obviously lawyers. Her face was flushed, her silver hair slightly disheveled. Ms. Martinez, she said, her voice carrying the kind of authority that had probably intimidated parents for decades. I need to speak with you privately. Immediately. I think our conversation should be public, I replied, very aware that every reporter was recording this exchange. Given that we're discussing public education policies funded by taxpayer dollars. Crawford's jaw tightened. You're interfering with an ongoing personnel investigation and making serious allegations without proper context. The context, I said, opening Peterson's envelope and pulling out a transcript, is that you personally instructed guidance staff to keep special education referrals below 4% to reduce district costs. October 15, 2013. Would you like me to quote your exact words? Her lawyers immediately flanked her, one of them speaking in urgent whispers. The other stepped forward with his hand raised. This conversation ends now. Ms. Crawford will not be making any public statements pending completion of the board's review process. What about the 47 students? I called out as they tried to guide Crawford away. The 47 assessment requests that were filed and ignored? Are you going to review that process too? Crawford stopped walking. For just a moment, her composed mask slipped, and I saw something that looked like genuine shock cross her face. 47, she whispered, then caught herself. I have no knowledge of any such. Audio recording from December 3, 2014, I said, checking Peterson's notes. Your voice, discussing efficient management of borderline assessment requests. Should I play it for everyone? The lawyers were physically trying to move Crawford toward the exit now, but she shook them off. Something in her expression had changed, the confident authority replaced by what looked like calculating panic. Ms. Martinez, perhaps we should discuss this privately after all, she said, her voice carefully controlled. I think there may be some misunderstanding about district policies during that period. The only misunderstanding, I replied, is thinking you could bury this forever. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. Local TV picked up the story. It's trending on social media. #Millbrook scandal is everywhere. The story was beyond damage control now, and everyone in that hallway knew it. The school board meeting was suspended indefinitely. By 9 a.m., the parking lot had transformed into a media circus with satellite trucks from 3 different news stations and reporters from newspapers as far away as the state capitol. I found myself in the surreal position of holding an impromptu press conference on the same front steps where I'd once waited for my mom to pick me up after another humiliating day. Ms. Martinez, a reporter from Channel 12 called out, have you listened to all the recordings in that envelope? I glanced at Peterson, who stood slightly behind me looking like a man who just stepped off a cliff. We've reviewed approximately 4 hours of material spanning from 2010 to 2018. What we found suggests a systematic pattern of administrative pressure to minimize special education costs through discriminatory guidance practices. My phone had been buzzing nonstop for the past hour. Jake texting updates from our office, Jennifer sending legal advice, and a growing stream of messages from unknown numbers, former students, parents, even current Millbrook faculty members wanting to share their experiences. One message stood out. This is Patricia Patterson, retired English teacher. I submitted dozens of assessment requests that were never processed. I kept copies. Can we meet? Mrs. Patterson. The teacher who tried to help me and never knew her efforts had been buried. My hand shook slightly as I typed back, yes. When and where? Sarah. Kevin Chin pushed through the crowd of reporters, his face grim. We have a problem. Check the district website. I pulled up Millbrook's homepage on my phone and felt my stomach drop. A banner across the top announced, due to ongoing legal concerns raised by contracted technology services, Millbrook School District is suspending all external IT operations pending review. They were canceling our contract. 2 days after the biggest breakthrough in TechFlow's history, I was about to lose everything. Those bastards, Jake's voice was tight with fury as he approached our group. I just got off the phone with our lawyer. They're claiming breach of confidentiality agreements and professional conduct standards. A reporter overheard and immediately pounced. Ms. Martinez, is it true the district is terminating your company's contract over these revelations? Before I could answer, Superintendent Crawford reappeared with what looked like half the district's legal team. She walked directly to the cluster of microphones, her earlier panic replaced by cold professionalism. I want to address the serious allegations that have been made this morning, she began, her voice carrying across the parking lot. While Millbrook District supports transparency and accountability, we cannot allow our educational mission to be compromised by vendors who violate confidentiality agreements and use their access to sensitive information for personal agendas. She was painting me as a vindictive former student using my business position to settle old scores. It was exactly the narrative Peterson had warned me about, and worse, it might actually work. Ms. Crawford, Jessica Wong called out, how do you respond to recordings that allegedly document administrative involvement in discriminatory guidance practices? Any such recordings would have been obtained through unauthorized access to confidential personnel discussions. We're reviewing all legal options regarding these apparent privacy violations. My phone rang, a call from TechFlow's main client, Riverside School District. My stomach clenched as I answered. Sarah, this is Superintendent Morris. We've been watching the news coverage about Millbrook. I need to discuss some concerns our board has raised about TechFlow's professional conduct standards. The implication was clear. If Millbrook painted me as an unethical vendor who exploited client access for personal vendettas, every school district contract we held was at risk. Crawford wasn't just trying to discredit my allegations, she was systematically destroying my business. Which meant the 47 students whose futures had been stolen weren't the only casualties in this war. The call that changed everything came at 11:47 a.m., just as I was watching my business empire crumble in real time. The caller ID showed Office of the Governor Education Division. Ms. Martinez? This is Director Susan Walsh from the State Education Department. I'm calling regarding the Millbrook situation. Can you be in the state capitol by 3 p.m. today? 2 hours later, I sat in a conference room across from the state's top education officials, Peterson's recordings playing through speakers while a room full of investigators took notes. Director Walsh's face grew grimmer with each audio clip. This is federal civil rights violation territory, she said finally. Ms. Martinez, are you prepared to testify before a state commission? Absolutely. Within a week, the investigation expanded to 3 neighboring districts. Within a month, it became the largest education discrimination case in state history. And by December, everything had changed. The final hearing was held on a cold Tuesday morning in January, exactly 8 months after I'd first walked back into Millbrook as a contractor. This time, I entered the state courthouse as the primary witness in Chin v. Millbrook School District, representing 47 students whose futures had been stolen. Superintendent Crawford sat at the defendant's table, her silver hair now streaked with white, flanked by lawyers whose billable hours were probably bankrupting the district. She avoided eye contact as I took the witness stand for the final day of testimony. Ms. Martinez, the state attorney asked, can you summarize the impact of these policies on your personal educational trajectory? I looked out at the gallery, where Kevin Chin sat with Amanda Foster, Mike Rodriguez, and dozens of other former students who'd found their voices. Mrs. Patterson was there too, holding a box of assessment requests she'd submitted over the years, requests that had been systematically buried. I spent 10 years believing I wasn't intelligent enough for higher education because trusted adults told me to accept my limitations. I built my career despite their sabotage, not because of their guidance. But the real damage wasn't to me, it was to the kids who believed them and never tried. The judge's ruling came down 3 weeks later, $47 million in damages, $1 million for each student whose assessment had been denied. The district was placed under state oversight, Crawford lost her pension and certification, and Peterson, who'd cooperated fully with the investigation, received a suspended sentence and community service requirement. But the sweetest victory came 6 months after that, when I received another email notification. Congratulations. TechFlow Solutions has been awarded the 5-year, $8.2 million contract for comprehensive technology and educational support services for Millbrook School District under state remediation supervision. This time, I wasn't just signing their paychecks, I was redesigning their entire system from the ground up. Every computer I installed, every database I built, every training session I conducted was a reminder that the girl they'd written off was now responsible for their professional future. The check I wrote to establish the Millbrook Learning Differences Support Foundation was for $2.1 million, my portion of the settlement. But seeing the first dyslexic student receive free assessment and tutoring services? That was priceless. On the foundation's opening day, I stood in the renovated guidance office where Peterson once crushed dreams. The new counselor, a young woman with ADHD who understood what it felt like to learn differently, smiled as she reviewed college applications with students who finally had proper support. Every student deserves an advocate, read the plaque on the wall, not a gatekeeper. They said I was too stupid to succeed. Now I sign their paychecks, fund their training programs, and make sure no student ever hears those words again. Some victories are worth waiting for.